businesses in transition. Apart from me, we have an eminent speaker, Sandeep Parekh, and then a panel of people who provide solutions to families in transition. According to a recent survey by Barclays Bank, India ranked number 1 in the countries that they surveyed of families reporting family disputes relating to money and business. It's not a global leadership we should be proud of. And therefore, what I will be presenting to you in the next 20 minutes is a peek at the world of family business governance. That is basically, how do families manage the relationship between the family members and their businesses so that they are able to achieve growth and harmony. My session has basically 4 parts. One is, what is a family constitution? Because it's not a very familiar thing in India. Number 2, what are the root causes of differences between families? Number 3, what does a family constitution look like? What does it contain normally? And what's the process of creating a family constitution? I see that most of the people in front of me appear to be advisors of different types to families, and I must tell you that families need this kind of advice and are looking for it eagerly. And from our point of view as advisors, definitely it represents the most powerful tool of customer engagement, because really we are addressing the thing that worries them most, which is, after me what? Evergreen specializes in creating family agreements related to family businesses continuity and related matters. Wealthy families are preoccupied with this issue and are looking for solutions. And the chap in the slide over there is from the past. We are right now at the beginning of a stage where families are engaging deeply with this question, and everybody has taken whatever learnings they need to learn from the most famous family dispute of all in our country, the one we saw on television for years. And many people tell me that we want to learn how to be like them, and we also want to learn how to pass on our wealth, our business, or not to pass it on in a way different from them. Family constitution is a very high-flying word, and typically people get very intimidated and they imagine things something like a memorandum of association, a very legalistic document. But it is not necessarily that way. Many of us may have bought something called Tiger Balm, which is a product from Japan. And the Tiger Balm family has been having a constitution of only 2 pages. And the constitution only has a statement of what they believe in and what they promise to stand up for. You could have a constitution of that nature, and you could have a very legalistic document, as indeed in India, for example, the Godrej family has recently created a family constitution with the help of lawyers and running into many hundreds of pages and with all kinds of conceivable situations addressed. Whenever I meet families, wealthy families, they tell me, you know, once they've got their guard down and they've stopped telling me that all is well and, you know, this doesn't happen in my house, then they kind of always tell me that definitely the issues that are preoccupying them are family-based, not business-based. Indian businessmen are great. Some of you guys here are great Indian businessmen. They know how to find a solution. They know how to grow with or without the government, in spite of the government. No global crisis can affect them. But Mahabharata can finish them off in 1 generation. However, it is not equally well perceived that the skill set for creating a great financial empire of hundreds of crores or thousands of crores, it might be entirely different from the one for creating the legacy of multi-generational wealth and stature. And this difference is what is the reason that in India, most often, I find families telling me, ये तो हमारा कर्म है. So we will have disputes. And they typically tell us, I mean, I'm sorry to say it, but they say, ever since my son got married, everything has gone wrong in my family. So that is, we are pretty clear, where everything lies and what the blame is. A different type of clarity could emerge were we to visit any of the great centers of learning in family business. I'm sorry to inform you that in India, the academic area relating to continuity of family businesses is practically non-existent. However, abroad, there are many courses in this, and there are vast departments. The kind of research you can get on this, can fill up your computer many times over. If you go to Amazon and write family business continuity, you'll get 10,000 hits, and there are hundreds and hundreds of books, and you can spend a small fortune educating yourself. The good news is all of that is available, and people like you would actually sit and try to learn that. However, from India, it's a very nascent area. The Family Firms Institute, which is based in New York, is the accreditation institute for family consultants such as myself, and it has only 2 other practitioners out of India. That basically 3 people in India do and are accredited to do this kind of work. It's a big area, and I'm sure many of you will take it up. Family constitutions are different depending on what you want. I'm a Gujarati, I like my food sweet. Somebody else may like their food a different type, with a different taste, a different flavor. There are some names I put up here. JMR has built easily what is the longest running exercise in family constitution making, which has taken them 9 years. This is not a benchmark, lest any of you get scared of that. But they took 9 years, and Mr. J.M. Rao's desire was, I want to build an institution that is eternal. This constitution reflects that vision. The Dabur Group has basically said, family is all very well, but the businesses are basically assets that belong to future generations. And their agreement looks like a shareholders' agreement, with rights, duties, responsibilities in the center of the agreement. The Murugappa Group, which has received an award for its constitution, has focused only on family unity, traditions, and values. So they have a softer approach to what they want to take to the next generation. Then they feel the money will kind of get there, but I want to be sure that I'm actually taking what we believe in as a family, who are we Murugappa, down to the next lot and the next lot after that. I meet a lot of families, as you might imagine, and I must tell you that sooner or later they're always telling me, I don't know why this is happening in my family. And what I learned from that is that they kind of think this is some unique affliction, specific to them, a virus that has targeted them, and this is unique to them. However, all the centers of learning will tell us, and all the academicians will tell us, and the practitioners in the world will tell us, that there are root causes, and these root causes are universal. Every family business will face certain types of conflict inherent in a family business structure, and I will talk about that for a couple of minutes. All of us know mom, and mom thinks that the child who doesn't work very hard should be taken care of more, and the person who's a wastrel and parties all night may not be punished, and so on. A family is an organization, it's an entity that operates from the heart. Basically, it has softer things in its priorities, and therefore, in every family, there will be one trend of thought saying the family is first. Keeping us together like the Murugappa Group, that is the most important thing, and being very soft on errant members and trying to win them back and retrace their steps is the fundamental thought for many people. And then of course there is a capitalist thought that this is all very well, but that's in the home and the kitchen and with mom, but basically we should be focused on keeping the business alive. A Marwadi client of mine gave me a beautiful phrase. He said, "Dukaan hai to makaan hai," and he summed it up well. That if I have my business, then I will actually have the rest of us, my family, my wealth, etc. I need to take care of my business. So this is a conflict inherent in every family business situation, and members of the family in one family, though brought up together, even twin brothers, can have a different orientation to this question. For example, should everybody get a job in the company? I have a client in Pune, and there are 12 men who go to work every day. And I think there's work for probably 2. The 10 of them really have nothing to do, but they run basically what's a glorified employment exchange. What does that do to the company? What does that do to 10 people who have nothing to do? And what does that do to the dynamics of people in office? And how does it encourage or discourage the guy who's really good to perform? And in fact, in reality, he's left and decided to do a job in New York. So these are the kind of questions where family and business are in conflict. And these are issues which you come across in every family. Another simple, obvious question would be whether we should focus on merit, seniority, who's eldest, is the eldest son of the eldest son the inheritor of the estate? These kind of questions preoccupy families, particularly Indian families, who are accustomed to this whole idea of seniority and age. Another way to look at the inherent conflict of family businesses is to realize that the family system is a family system and the business system has 2 parts. One is a collection of owners who have different priorities, and one is a collection of managers. So for example, in many families, families give ownership rights to women but do not allow women to come to work. So there are, say, the matriarch, daughters, daughters-in-law, all of them constituting owners, and the guys who go into work constituting managers and with different priorities. When we go into the second and third generation, the number of people here can go to like 50, 60 people. And you might have only 2 people working. The Dabur family has done that. They have exactly 2 people working from the family, but everybody else is an owner. And they are preoccupied with the things that owners are preoccupied with. And therefore, it really depends which hat are you wearing in which meeting. A father who is accustomed to, getting his own way at home might come into office and expect that his New York educated son, who spent the last 10 years of his life abroad, is going to toe the line and might get a rude shock because, when he's coming in as a head of the family and then when he's coming in as a head of business, there's a different kind of dynamic. These kind of pulls and pressures, they plague every family. Long, long ago in school, we learned that prevention is better than cure. A family constitution, if we forget all the big English and jargon and all the books, is basically a document trying to see that different perspectives, as we have seen in the previous 5 minutes, do not lead to disputes, destruction and dissolution of the family or the business. Prevention is better than cure is what it's all about. A typical family constitution will have 3 parts. It will have structures, assuming the family has not only mom, dad and a couple of kids, and it's a second or third generation family, then questions will arise: who will sit on the board, who will succeed whom, who has a right to go to work, who has a right to be in management, what are the rights of people who don't have these rights, and so on and so forth. So you would have structures, you will have policies, and you have processes. And the collection of these 3 things is what a constitution is about. In India, as you may all be aware, the rights of women are being enshrined and being very enshrined with a very hard hand by the courts, and the rights of women, therefore, especially after the recent amendments, are very, very tight. Therefore, there are rights of women, non-employed owners, and obligations of different members of the family. Families are always preoccupied with creating policies on employment, and in particular, how the rewards are going to be divided and how the roles are going to be divided. By and large, I find in wealthy families, there is a desire to take some risk off the table. So those of you who are investment bankers and lawyers and all will see a huge business opportunity out of that, because people typically say, well, I do realize that my family needs some safety, and instead of having 200% of my assets in the business, I'm going to sell off a particular part or a business or a product or something and put away 50, 100 crores into creating a safety net for the family. These kind of policies and many, many others are what a constitution would typically have, depending on what the family is currently concerned with. When they get to the second or third generation, the kind of emotional thing about, my business is, I love it more than my son, it kind of starts wearing a bit thin, and then people start thinking of the economic benefits. And when they start thinking of economic benefits first, then their constitutions are more like shareholders' agreements, which basically says that, there are a group of people who own the company, and some of these group of people get elected to go and manage the company, and what will be their rights and responsibilities, their rewards, and what will be the kind of processes by which people who are not managing are feeling comfortable that, their interests are taken care of and the company is doing well. In India, I don't know how to say it, we don't even want to discuss the word succession. And that's why I use the word continuity. Because whenever I tell somebody, let's do succession planning, then people say, but I'm only 82, as we have seen recently in the BJP. So people are actually, they don't like this idea at all. And we all think we are kind of eternal, as they teach us in the Bhagavad Gita. However, managing succession, thinking about it, or at least confiding to me about it, is the first step that almost every family takes. And they start thinking that how are we going to choose who will come after me, and how is that possible? Are we comfortable with that? You will be not so happy to know that that Barclays in their survey found that 35% of Indian family owners said that they did not believe that the next generation was capable of taking care of their legacy. So this is an obsession that many people have, and you will find a lot of families with people elder to me will be telling you, my young guys are not hungry enough, they went and studied in England, they went and studied in America, now they want the good life, they are the generation of champagne and strawberries and so on and so forth. And so this is something that is a part of the process which everybody is very keen on. Decision making. You will be amazed how much time I spend in a constitution on decision making. And when I ask people, how do you take decisions in your family? Invariably somebody with a very deep voice, the patriarch will say, of course, unanimously. So all of you know what unanimous decisions mean in Indian families. And then there are, of course, families who have many, many members, and all of them are taking these unanimous decisions independently.